like you hear people all the time, or at least I hear people all the time saying shit like, man, like producing music, it used to be so fun. You know, back in the day, I used to just get lost in the source for like hours and just like making crazy shit. And now these days it just feels like such a slog, and like I can't even like sit down to write music anymore. It's like such a pain in the ass. You know, I'm like so uninspired, all this kind of shit. And I feel like part of that is for that reason, because they just like forget to explore, you know. And I feel like that exploratory sort of childlike discovery process is most of the fun.
Absolutely. That's exactly why, I do the chip music thing. As my limitation, creative limitation, and
Welcome to the Mr. Bill podcast. I'm Anand Harsh, editor-in-chief of TheUnts.com, Bill's manager, and the Hagrid to Mr. Bill's Harry Potter. If you want to know how Bill got a lightning bolt scar on his forehead, you'll just have to go to the Kill Bill workshop in DC on June 1st. More on that in a bit, but let me just say that the Kill Bill sounds emanating from my basement right now, where Chris and Bill are deep in the studio, are very exciting. Today's guest is retro gaming enthusiast cTrix, who is best known for crazy live performances incorporating original tunes played live from a combo of dusty Nintendos, Gameboys, Ataris, Segas, Neo Geos, Amigas, and more. He also has a super popular YouTube channel called Debug Live, which centers around the budget home studio gear of the 80s and 90s. Endlessly fascinating stuff for old fogies like myself, but what is old is new again. Everything is on the website: tutorials, sample packs, tour dates, and this podcast. Go to live.mrbillstunes.com for absolutely everything Mr. Bill. Kill Bill plays Flash in DC on Wednesday, June 1st. In addition to solo sets, the guys are also doing a workshop at 7 p.m. Space is limited. Bill and Chris will be cracking open their Kill Bill project files and giving their fellow producers a look at the gooey innards of their insane Ableton sessions. And you can find out about that scar. On June 3rd, Bill is the special guest at Tribal Connection in Ohio. In July, he's at Hampton motherfucking Coliseum with Ganja White Knight and a bunch of their buds. That's July 8th and 9th. And on August 12th, you can catch a solo Bill IDM set and Kill Bill performance at Firelights in Pennsylvania. Tickets at linktree/Mr. Bill's Tunes. There you have it. Enjoy Bill's chat with cTrix.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you are listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're 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 listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
Hey, you're listening to the Mr. Bill podcast.
So, man, awesome to connect. Thanks for coming on the podcast, for starters. There's going to be like a whole intro and stuff before this, so you will have been well and truly introduced by this point of the chat, so people should know who you are. But for people who don't know who you are, would you like to explain who you are and what it is that you do?
Yeah, for sure. My name's Chris. I play music and do YouTube content under the alias of cTrix with a YouTube channel called Debug Live. And I'm very interested in the whole concept of taking, I guess, the minimal viable systems that could make audio that were cheap in the 1980s and getting music out of them. So we're really talking about like home gaming systems of, the 1980s and early 1990s. So everything from the 70s as well, the Atari 2600 and the original Nintendo and the original Megadrives and or Genesis if you're in the States, and things like Gameboys and some of it is using original software and original like chips and things like that. Some of it is using plug-in cartridges that allow you to sort of take things a bit further. But I always try to make music, using the devices fairly purely, and I guess that exploration of those devices leads to all kinds of adventures in audio discovery and music. So it's good fun.
Right. So the whole expedition is basically take these really old devices like Sega Megadrives, whatnot, and just try to make music with those as a creative limitation, basically.
Yeah, and my vibe is always to try to get it so that I can put it on a cartridge that is the plain as they used to be manufactured cartridges. Put it in the system, fire it up, and it will start playing.
Nice.
Sometimes with interactivity, so you can jump between the different parts and play it in a live setting as well. So.
Damn. Yeah, I've seen some videos of you playing on YouTube where you have like some old CRT monitor and like some old, screen. I have no idea what the hell is going on in this kind of scene. I mean, I know like a very little amount about demo scene, but yeah, you'll have to educate me. So, are you a part of what you would call the demo scene?
I actually run Australia's sort of main demo party, I guess you'd call it, that's been running for 16 years. So myself and a friend have been running that for ages. So yeah, that's a big collaboration of people who, I mean, it's been happening since almost the computer clubs of the 1980s. When you used to own a computer, it was something, it was a bit like owning a 3D printer or something. Like, you're in a special kind of group of people, and you'd get together and you'd compare notes and you'd show each other what you'd done and things like that. A bit like modular, people who use modulars. It's that very similar kind of vibe. And so, yeah, you'd come together with your computers and you'd show each other what you could do and what you'd learned. And it sort of broke into this scene where there started being copy parties where people would start copying stuff to each other. But then people would put on the start of their copied release, they would put like a little thing, this was cracked by like ACA or something like Australian Crackers United or something. You'd have your intro screen with the like music that played at the start. And you'd place that on the front of the, on the front of the crack, so that when you distributed the game, you'd have this that would come up before the game played. And I guess that spurred into its own set of tricks of, well, how far can we take this? And it hit the point where it wasn't just a little intro on the start of a piece of cracked software anymore. It was its own art form. And it was, how far can we take the computer? And if you're not writing a game or making something that's interactive, you can do a lot more tricks and a lot more things with your graphics and with your sound that will only kind of play once in that situation, teetering on the edge of using all your computer power. But it's using tricks that maybe you wouldn't normally use. And there's some undocumented stuff on a lot of machines that you can jump into, or things that are very touchy to use in everyday programming, but that could do amazing graphical things that look 3D and push the capability far beyond what you would ever imagine the computer could do. But a lot of it is programmable trickery that's in a very sort of fragile ecosystem of pushing a computer to the edge. So that spanned a lot of computer systems. I mean, the Commodore 64 was the classic, and it's still being exploited to this day. They're still discovering new things they can do with it and new tricks, and the Commodore Amiga. But I mean, also the ST and then the PC and a lot of those other machines of the early 90s, end of the 80s. So it sort of spawned this whole, how far can we push a machine? And that went across into music as well. So that's where the Commodore 64 peeps. You've got this filter, and then you'd start hearing dance music on the radio, and you'd be like, oh, I want to try to make music that's got that dance vibe, and how can I do it with one filter? And jumping between different oscillators really quick. And so there was this. It's half kind of a programming mind, half creative. So that very in between, and you find a lot of fascinating people in that scene.
Yeah, no doubt. Man, yeah, that's so crazy. So from my understanding, it's like the demo scene is essentially people who are trying to create the most intense audio-visual experience they possibly can in the smallest file size possible, right?
Not necessarily the smallest file size. You've got file limitations depending what you're using. If you're in the modern era computing, like a Windows 10 machine or something like that, then you can impose limitations to make it more fun. Because the other side of this is there's a lot of groups when they come together at a demo party, which is where everybody comes and meets. People will bring their music and bring their bits of animation that's through code, and they'll compete for like who can come up with the craziest stuff. And it's very friendly, but it's also like it's quite prestigious amongst the people to do well. So you'll say things like, we've only got 64 kilobytes of space, and we've got to do in that 64 kilobytes, which is not much more than an email with a very small JPEG attached.
Right.
We've got to have our music engine, our, effects processor, our synth generators, our everything to do with the music, including like the software to run it, the tune in memory, and then you've also got to have graphics and, animation and objects and a graphics engine as well. So it's got to be a complete, package in that 64K. And you'd go, well, that's got to be impossible. And the answer is no, it's not impossible at all. It's just there's a lot of modern code is just massively bloated. And, I see any kind of DAW or program that's bigger than a few meg, and I'm like, oh, what's it doing that could possibly make it this big if it doesn't have a sample library in it,
Right.
which is, is kind of interesting. And it's interesting because, like, for instance, Reaper, by Cocos Software is being sort of pushed through from people who were sort of involved in that scene a little bit. And that's like the one DAW that's like, 5 or 6 meg for the whole installer. And that's possibly why they have that ethos as well,
Right. And it's also probably maybe even one of the most feature worthy DAWs that exists right now.
It's wild, yeah. It's a
insane.
really fascinating piece of software.
Right. So what kind of like when you're looking at something like a cartridge or a game or trying to make like an AV experience in a small package or whatever, like what is your thought process? Like how do you even start with something like that?
Well, I mean, it's like any synthesizer or any piece of gear that you come across. Like, you after a while, you sort of know, what it is. You look at it and you go, okay, well, I can see that it's got, these features on it. I have a rough idea of what it's going to be able to do based on the, the things I can see. And you'll get a specification. So, like, if I was working on a Commodore 64, I would know that there's 3 channels of audio. So I've got 3 notes I can play at once. That's the first thing that I'd figure out. And that's like your polyphony. And it's a bit like looking at your racks if you've got a modular synth or something like that. You can look at the modules and kind of start to imagine how you chain them all together. Mm-hmm. Now, there's obviously a little bit more limitation when it comes to how you can chain things and put things together, but then you've got certain waveforms. Potentially, you've got some special features like a resonance filter or something where you can connect 2 channels together and it'll do something really crazy. And then, on top of that, okay, well, it's got like a filter, but does the filter allow you to do all the channels or just one of the channels? And that's the thing. Sometimes you'll have, like if you take a Nintendo, you'll have 5 channels worth of audio, but the first 2 channels only have an octave range of a certain like note. They don't really go down to bass notes. They sort of go down to like C2 on a piano. And then you've got a triangle channel, which is like really rough bass, and that goes low, but doesn't go that high. It sort of goes really high pitched and sort of gets whistly and out of control. And then you've got a channel that can just do noise. So you can look at any given device and sort of understand roughly its capability. And your first track is always about experimenting around really to see what it can do, and usually a whole load of patterns. A lot of platforms have software already developed for them. But if you don't have software developed for them, then you can usually find some documentation from back in the day telling you about the chipsets inside them and, where in memory to start whacking them to make sound. And you just start feeding registers into memory and just see what comes out audio-wise the other side and just write down a big list of, what you did and what sound it made. And then that hopefully correlates to the documentation. And then from there, you can generate usually a piece of code that then plays back the music on the device. So...
Wow. So it seems like...
Or you could go and make a device that plays MIDI, converts it into MIDI, that just taps a MIDI output and allows you to like chain it in if you wanted to. But,
Right. So it seems like the whole process is kind of like this exploratory process, which exists also in like, regular DAWs and regular music as well. But it seems almost like with what you're doing is... it's kind of like it's locked behind some like black box, like there's some magic to it almost. Or
A little bit. And I think that was what it was always like in the old days, when companies were developing for these machines. They had an in-house team that were trying to get the games made first for the console so that they could reap the money from the release titles. And then slowly you had the third parties who would start to come in and try to figure it out. And sometimes would be thinking outside of the box, to develop, their ideas, on top of those original release titles, which is still happening today, of course. But I mean, the documentation wasn't always really well published or put out there. It was a bit of a closed door thing, especially for the console industry. I remember my old housemate used to work for a company, and when the PlayStation was out, he brought home this blue PlayStation, the original PlayStation. I was like, whoa, and it had this giant connector on the back of it. I was like, what the fuck is that? It's like, oh, it's the dev PlayStation. Like, these are $25,000. I was like, what? $25,000. But that was what they used to charge for these dev boxes, so that you could tap into them and actually develop for them. So it was never really encouraged for homebrew people to stuff around with these devices and to sort of play around, at least not the console level. But of course, your computers, your home computers, like your Spectrums or your Commodore 64 or your Amigas or your PCs, they were designed as a box that you could noodle with and do what you want. So, yeah, it's kind of like there's two trains of thought, I guess, the home computer and then the console stuff. I find the console stuff particularly interesting because it didn't have that, like, entry level back in the day, and so you sort of like there is information out there on the internet now, of course, but you still go on that exploration, as you say.
Yeah, man, that's so crazy. I also feel like on the other side of it, like we were talking about in email, there's the other allure, it seems, to this is almost that it's just like it's like a hard to get thing. It's like coveted by certain people maybe, and we were chatting, for instance, about your music releases, and I was saying like, hey, do you have like any releases that I can listen to online? And you said your only easy to access release is that Amiga synthwave one that you did, but every other release you've done is pretty much just on a USB stick that you give away at shows or something like that, right?
Yeah, well, I sell at shows, or a cartridge. Like, I manufacture like Megadrive cartridges, and I'll have that album. So you plug it in, and instead of being a game, it fires up, and you've got a menu system. And I actually made them custom for each one custom. So it had its own graphics and its own binary on it. And you sell them for like, $50. But people would just be, holy shit, you're making like 20 of these and that's it. And so, yeah, and you'd have all graphics, artwork and things. So you just basically flip through the tracks with your controller and you listen to the whole album off the console.
Right.
Which I've got to make a YouTube video about, because I think people will probably be quite interested to how to do that. But yeah, and that was I used the Megadrive especially for that. It's got an FM chip in it, which does this incredible sounds. Like, it's just like it's got so much capability, but it also has some really cool undocumented features that do some really weird stuff that I think Yamaha might have rushed it out a bit. And it means that some of the features will rap and do these like crazy kind of clicky things that can kind of go out of control, but you can push them. So it's like when you get an LFO and you can push it real high and sort of make FM. It's kind of like that, but it's like with the envelope wrapper, but it's sort of different depending which device you get and which revision. So like, I was able to put some of that stuff in and, make some real wild tracks, and different people have said that sounds different on different consoles, which I find is great. You're hitting that point where you're exploiting.
Yeah, it's like, well, yeah, like every experience that everybody has with that same release is completely different almost. So. It's almost going to be that way anyway, like no matter what, because, people listening on different speaker systems and, in different states of mind, different times of the day, all that kind of stuff. Yeah. And, people, obviously everyone has their own internal biases with music and how they experience it and whatnot. But yeah, on top of that, like also having the music itself be like different also is like just a whole other variable to throw in there.
And I guess it's a bit like putting a record on or something, it's a different experience to putting a Spotify list on or something like that. And I think it's the same thing again. It's different to pull out a console and then, hook it up into a set of speakers and then, put the cartridge in and play it for a group of people. You probably, even if you're doing that, it's a bit more of an event.
Yeah.
You know, you're going to sit down and listen to that. It's going to take a bit of effort to play it. Which, I mean, and I thought about it. I mean, do I do a capture of it as well, a hardware cap? And I did do a hardware cap and gave it to someone because this poor Japanese guy bought it at a show and they were so excited, but they didn't actually have a Megadrive to play it on. And they were like, oh, you know, does it come with download, you know, the download code? And I'm like, no, it's just the cartridge. And they were like, oh, like, how am I going to play this? So I eventually got their email and sent them a copy. I think they're the only one who's got a copy. So.
Yeah. And is this something that you have like a pretty strict boundary with, or like you're not going to capture any of your releases on hardware and you just want them to be available?
No. Look, I totally can do that. The reason I haven't is the first release I did, which was that synthwave release, is I wanted to be true to the sort of 1980s way of mixing and creating stuff. So like I broke everything down onto channels of one of the old MCI JH24 reel-to-reel machines. And I had everything running through a SSL console. All my compressors were, you know, the original stuff, you know, from the 1980s. And I had like the digital, I had a Space Echo, but like, you know, all of that sort of rack original effects. And we did everything manually and we had reverb plates. And I guess I did that because I wanted to really have that experience of that 1980s studio vibe. And because I set the bar so high on that release for myself, I kind of felt like I have to sort of keep doing that analog way of working for the rest of the tunes, where it's like, well, maybe people are perfectly happy if I just like plug the console or the Amiga, which is sort of more of a capable box in terms of what it can do. Maybe if I just plug that straight into an audio recorder and just hit record, like they're just as happy. You know, I don't know how much that engineering was appreciated, but for me, I found important to put that into it, to turn it from something that was just sitting on this, you know, fairly raw and ready console to color the sound in and give it like, you know, and I could do it in, of course, in a digital DAW. There's no reason I couldn't. You know, I mix film for surround sound for a living, but it's like that's then it crosses this boundary into like I'm just firing up my digital world, like, and using digital effects, and I don't know, it just feels different
Right.
than having it on tape and then having to drop stuff in and line things up and sync things up manually with manual sync and voltage sync, and it's kind of exciting, and it's that, I don't know, I really kind of love that journey of how janky it all was in the 1980s to make stuff work and sync.
Right.
And just even effects and patching things in, and you've only got your one reverb and your one delay that you've got, you know, on a bus. And
Totally.
Yeah.
I also think that if something is harder to do, once you achieve it, you're like, oh my God, I did it. And like, then it's so much more satisfying. And also it gives you this like sense of ownership over the piece of music, you know, whereas like if something is too easy to do, like for instance, if you just pull a sample out of a pack and throw it on the grid in a digital audio workstation and then throw another sample on, and you're like, bam, that's a beat, right? It's like a drum loop and a couple of bass loops, bam, it's done. It doesn't feel like you did enough, and it doesn't feel like you have enough ownership over it because it was too easy. And I think that even if like those few loops, like almost objectively in every way, sound more like hi-fi and like quote unquote better than anything you could do on like a Commodore 64 or something, it still will never be as satisfying or as fun because it like was just too easy. And I think like this may be like an extension of capitalist society where we just like put we put value on effort. So it's like if something took a lot of effort, we go, that's valuable. And
yeah, I've never stopped to think of it like that. But yeah, I think you're probably right. Because, you know, so many of my tracks are finished the night before a show.
Right.
And they're rushed out the door. And then, I mean, that I always find that like, you know, 2 a.m. time, like I just launch into this crazy frame of mind where I start, that's where all of the wild like bridges come in and all of the bits that, you know, that get real complicated. And then suddenly you've got a track that started off as like a techno acid track and now it's got like a prog rock kind of crazy lead line doing something with that. That all happens the night before a show at 2 a.m. So, and then you crawl out of bed at, you know, 2 p.m. the next day or 3 p.m. and you scrounge up your equipment and take it and play it at the show. But like that's kind of how tracks get finished for me. So it's a very fuzzy, it's like, oh geez, do I still need to work on this like a little bit and refine it and things? And I never take it to that refined level. It always feels like it's something that I've thrown out for a live situation, not necessarily for that, as you say, that which I've put effort into, curated into something that you would listen to in your lounge room. Or in the car, you know.
I think those kind of like deadlines are just another creative limitation that are good to have as well. I try and put like these. I noticed during quarantine, right? Like we had I live in America, so we were just locked down here for like the last 2 years basically, and I didn't have any shows, and usually shows for me are also like a source of like false like deadline where it'll get to a point where I'm like, shit, I have a show this weekend. There's a beat here that I like really want to put in the set. So I have to like quickly at least get it playable. So I have to like, at least make it so the build up is like good and then the drop is good. And then like there's this mix out point, right? And so long as I can get like those things done, I can like play it in the set. So I'll at least get that much done. But if I don't have, I found during lockdown, if I didn't have that limitation of like, shit, I have to have it done by the weekend. Just whips would just sit around like not playable or not finished at all for like months. And
yep, 100%.
So yeah, definitely
same thing.
Having shows is definitely a good source of kicking you in the ass, I think, to do stuff. Speaking of shows, like what do your live performances look like? Because I mean, I assume you don't just like DJ your stuff out on like USB sticks or something, or like. Yeah.
No, I take the hardware. It's a sort of in between live and DJing. If I've got the Commodore Amiga, it's got 4 channels of playback. So you've got channel 1 is the kick, you got channel 2, which is the percussion. Like channel 3, which is like the sort of bass stuff. Channel 4's the chords and other bits. All comes together. But it comes out of the Amiga as a stereo output. So 2 come out of one channel, 2 come out of the other. So you can write it so that different things will come out of different channels. And I just have a DJM 800 in the middle. And I use that basically to cut parts in and out or to chuck like slight reverbs and sort of like, it's almost like a mastering mixing, but you can sort of cut things around. And I've also got mutes on the machine where I can sort of mute. And it'll hit loops and it'll sit in a loop until I nudge it into the next spot or nudge it on like, a bit more forwards in the song. And you can jump around the song as well. So it's kind of a little bit like a very simplistic resequence on the fly a little bit and at least cut things around and cut things in and out. And so that's what I do with the Amiga. Sometimes I've got a little micro brute as well because they fit in backpacks. They're super handy. And just a little delay pedal because I think they sound fantastic with a bit of stereo delay. And I'll just like have, ARPs and stuff in there and I'll just be playing and I just kind of know roughly what I'd layer over the top. And I just have it fairly softly underneath. Sometimes with the synth wavy stuff, I'll just chuck solos in and, be playing some live solo stuff as well. And sometimes with the electronic-y stuff, it's more just like a extra note in the mix, here and there. Not usually at the forefront of a track, but it just sort of sits in. At the same time as juggling around, the order of a track and stuff. So, yeah.
Right. So you would say the equivalence of that maybe in the modular scene or something like that, because this might be the closest thing that I understand to what you're doing, is like, for instance, I saw Richard Devine play a set, if you know him. And
yes,
he had just like a little modular rack. It was like a little skiff thing, and he just had like a bunch of patches that were built already, and one patch was all with white cables, one was all with purple cables, one was all with blue cables, and they were all just like all the white cables were held together, like loomed together with like felt ties. All the blue ones were loomed together with felt ties and so on. And then he would sort of just like have like these multiple patches that he would move between, right, in his set. So would you say it's kind of similar for you in that sense, but instead of like having these multiple patches, you have just like these multiple pieces of hardware that you're sort of like melding between?
It's sort of. I guess the difference would be that I don't generally deviate too much from that. Like I can't do lots of like oscillator, like retuning and tweaking and things like that. Like I wish on, for instance, the Megadrive, I had more capability to change like my FM operators and things like that on the fly. And you can do that if you get a MIDI kit and you play it out via MIDI into the system. But then you've got like a modern computer on stage, right, which for me ruins the fun of it. I like to have it running off the actual console. So I guess with that, it is a little bit more of, a play, break it out into 2 channels and then, tweak around with it a bit in a live setting. But it is a little bit, in the fact that, like where you were saying, Richard had the 3 sets, it is like that in the fact that I've got, bits of hardware on stage. Like I'll usually at minimum have like a Game Boy, an Amiga, and a Mega Drive on stage.
Right.
And
that's
it, no computers.
And there'll be just like beats that you've sort of pre-made in these things at home.
Yeah.
And then you'll just sort of like tweak those beats, like change.
Yeah, and then there's sometimes the sequencing and things like that. Like on the Game Boy, there's a program called LSDJ, which is a little sound DJ. And it's designed for basically you've got your 4 parts. You've got your 2 like channels that are sort of like limited range square waves, and you've got like a full range weird 4-bit. Or is it 3-bit? No, it's a 3-bit like oscillator that's like a wavetable playback, but super lo-fi. You can do a lot of crazy stuff with that. Then you've got noise. But because it's only 4 channels, you can basically use the arrow keys to jump around and mute and unmute parts, and then you can set up loops and then jump into different parts of the track and get, different sequences. That's a bit more like a 4-channel version of Ableton, I like, if you like. But instead of using like controller, you're using up and down, left, right, and select and start and unmuting and muting sections and soloing bits for a second and then letting them go again. So, like, I guess different devices have different levels of software available for playback and performance.
Right.
And there's a scene around each of the like platforms that provides, it's not a huge, like there's not tens of thousands of people, but there's at least, hundreds, for each. But then there's some fascinating things that are spun out of that as well. But yeah.
So what you could essentially, if I'm understanding correctly, you could probably do all of this stuff just out of Ableton using like plugins that generate like 8-bit sounds, like Plogue chip sounds and all that kind of crap.
Yeah.
And like probably just use an APC or something. Yeah, right. But like ish, yeah. And it would probably be more stable. It'd probably be easier. It'd probably be like all of these things. So is the allure to doing it out of the console just the fact that it's like harder and just like kind of you have to like there's some sort of like respect that goes from artist to artist to be like, holy shit, like you did that on that sort of thing, or like, or is it just the fact that you just find it fun and exploratory, or like I'm just trying to understand?
Yeah, it's a bit of both, but I mean also if you want something to sound like it's from that device, you kind of got to do it on the device because it does things that limit you with what you can do. And you run into brick walls all the time where you're like, oh, fuck, I'm out of a note. I want to make this full chord and I can't add this. And so you end up doing your ARPs and doing all these things out of necessity to build a chord section within a track. Or sometimes there's pops and clicks and there's weird things that happen, and they're really annoying when you first discover them, and they continue often to be annoying. But it's like that's part of the limitation of dealing with a computer, and the whole thing of just being able to use a VST plugin is just like, oh, you won't have any of these limits. But then you stop writing music that really sounds like it's made for the device. And even when you bring it across to the device and you put it on, it often, I know this sounds weird, but it sounds kind of fuzzy and not as well produced and not as good out of the device. And then you have to sort of like EQ it and compress it a bit sometimes to sort of get it. And you just get a different sound about it, like, and like different, like, I've got a Nomad here. If I turn that on, I don't know if you can hear the hissing noise on that.
I can't, no.
It's probably filtering it out over Zoom, but I'll give you the separate so that people on the stream can hear it. But like that's just the noise of the, when I turn it on. So there's like things like hums and buzzes and things that, just
gives it character.
And just and just like the Commodore 64 SID chip, like nothing can really sound like they all sound slightly different, and they're just a bit wild and crazy when you actually have them in the flesh. And there's a different sense of writing, like, because and this I guess brings us to the biggest thing about writing for a lot of these chip platforms, is a lot of them are in the tracker format. So rather than putting dots on a page piano roll style, you're
it's all like
writing music like an Excel spreadsheet.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, which like I'm really used to it, and I find it really good because you have all of your channels and all of your commands and everything in front of you at all times. Yep. It's not like I find it terribly confusing to work in a DAW because there's plugins that hide themselves. You know, and I have 3 28-inch screens because I do my film mixing stuff, but that's like I have every single thing on the screen at the same time. Like I hate having a plugin that is hidden.
Yeah.
That's apart from maybe instances where there's something like that happens for a moment on a piece of dialogue or something. Like I just like to have everything in front of me so I can. And I guess it's that because I grew up with 4 tracks and you know that real like tape sort of manual vibe.
You're like no abstractions.
Yeah. And I find as soon as I'm out tabbing or I'm looking around for stuff, I just you know, especially for music, I get very confused and very tired writing music, and I find it snaps me out of the composing. And the fact that you could always see how every single note relates to every single other note at a glance, because they're just like listed in front of you, all of the notes and all of the commands at all times. You can just tweak your track, and you can copy and paste slabs of a track at once. You're not like it, but you're doing it almost at piano roll level. It'd be like having every single piano roll open at the same time in front of you, and all of the parameters and everything for every track, where you can easily copy and paste and do like so it changes the way you work, and it changes the way you write. And I think certainly for electronic dance stuff, especially if you're chopping things up and you're jumping between things a lot, like there's a big reason that event list style writing works really well. You know, especially when you're dealing with polyphony and you want specific things to cut in and out at certain times and things like that, you can see, you know, with your sampling, you know, exactly what you're doing on what channels. Whether with a piano roll, you might have 2 notes and you know you've got 2 polyphony and you can juggle it. But what if the last note you put on, you wanted that one to be the one you cut off, you know, in your polyphony chain. So you can do all of this composing in a way that really controls exactly how the track sounds and how things cut off and come on, and you know, even things like doing build-ups and bits. You've got that per note automation that I know things like Bitwig have it now. I think Ableton has it too now, but that you can, you know, the automation comes with the note when you copy and paste it. So there's a lot of things you can do, and you can even, you're writing modern music in that way. You know, there's things like what's the program? Renoise. Renoise, that's right. Yep. Almost called it Rebirth. Renoise that could do that. You know, that, yeah, and a lot of the drum and bass and breaks and beats, people swear by it, you know.
Yeah.
It's just a different way of writing music. I do both, but I find them very, very different to work with.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. I think one thing I noticed was when I sold all my modular stuff basically at this point, but like I got into it for a while because I wanted to make $10,000 fart noises. And I was like starting to write music on that. And then I started to like, I was like, oh, wow, this sounds really crazy and different and awesome. And then I would try recording it into Ableton. And my idea was like, if I can record it into Ableton, and if that WAV file that is in Ableton now, is recorded in Ableton, that means it could have been created in Ableton. Like if it can exist in the digital realm, it could have been created in the digital realm. It was created in the digital realm, but it was created by an audio input that was then converted into digital, right? So that was my like style of thinking. But there's something about it. Like as soon as you record it in, it's not the same. It's like you take that modular shit that you're listening to going straight into your speakers or whatever, and as soon as you like record it in, it just doesn't sound the same. And also, as soon as you start like chopping it up and resequencing it digitally and EQing it and all that kind of shit, it instantly sounds fucking like electronic stuff and no longer analog at all. It's like there is something about that non-linearity with all of the noise sources and all of the like, you know, clocking and stuff like that even if it's just off by the tiniest amount, it's like your brain can kind of tell.
Yeah, that whole recording it, I mean, that has been obviously the whole thing of recording since the early days, you know. It's different. I don't know. And it's like when you record sometimes, I don't know if you found this with your modular stuff, you'd see all this low frequency shit that you can't even hear that's in tracks and stuff. And like an extra stuff, and you're like, oh, I've got to filter that out and make sure that. And then it's like, hang on a sec, is the way all of this is summing live and doing its thing, is it adding these extra weird low frequency shit that we can't even hear, but it's like pushing and pulling around the way the speakers work and the way the electronics and the speakers are doing things? Like it's pretty terrifying when you make a sound sometimes in that modular world and then you bring it into waveform. You're like, fuck, is that what I've been sending to my speakers? No wonder they've been wobbling around.
Yeah, it's just some like giant square thing with like, yeah, totally.
some subcarrier wave. Yeah, and I think that's some of the magic for the people. I really get the whole modular thing. I just refuse to get into it because I can't afford it. And it's the fascination for me is just seeing how some of these patches are made and just being like, wow, like what is that actually doing? Like what is the waveform on that? What would that look like?
Right. Yeah, and the same thing with modular stuff, right? It's like I've played with the modular stuff a ton, and I'll play with it for 10 minutes, and all of a sudden I'm like, holy fuck! Like I'm making sounds I've never thought to make before, right? Like this is just, what the hell is that sound? That's crazy. That sounds insane. And then I'll look at the patch and kind of reverse engineer it a bit and be like, oh, it's just I could do this in Serum. And that would be the same. And then I do it in Serum and I'm like, it is basically the same. But then I'm like, why the fuck have I never thought to do that in Serum before? And it's just the way that the technology is presented to you. It kind of it holds your hand and guides you through in a way, And yeah, I think probably some of the allure that you're experiencing with writing on these older sort of devices as well is like that, right? Which it's causing you to write, music that you probably wouldn't think to write if you were writing it on Fruity Loops or Ableton or something.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and it changes the way you write in those programs. So I use Reaper as my main DAW for writing as well, and I find that I never have a track count larger than it'll fit on my screen. I've probably done tracks that have 18 channels if I'm really pushing it, but. I don't know, and I do a lot of sharing of, I'll have a channel for generic stuff and be sharing a lot of waveform. I do a lot of, when I compose in a modern way, I'm very strange. I like to actually just play stuff in and have waveform on the screen and then just zoom in and see the bits of waveform and how they line up. Drums I'll grid, but then everything else I'll just turn the grid off and turn the quantize off and just place bits of waveform. I'll play it in as a live take and then I'll just chop it up and reposition it and then just copy and paste it. So there'll be 100,000 bits of waveform on my screen as my track. But then you can zoom right into it and you can see how the phase is working and how it's flipping and do little automations on the clips and line them up and get it exactly so that, rather than having sidechain compression and things like that, you just sort of manually tweaking and tickling things and making sure that where the phase is. Sometimes when it's slightly out of phase, it's it sort of helps with the mastering, the levels sometimes because it doesn't stack as much. Yep. Obviously, you don't want it to suck away. So you get to that macro level of seeing how the waveform works, and it's I really that is a very different way of working to how I've seen other people work, where they'll just strictly be piano roll and plugins, and they'll never render anything out. They'll just render it at the end of the day and just use their ears, which is cool. I really think there's a lot to just using your ears, but for me, I really like to see behind the magic. I like to know what's happening with my voltages, and I always think about my speakers and how they're moving and how they and I don't know, maybe that's coming from a background of sound and film as well. Maybe that's I am pretty petty about that stuff, but it's really strange. I find it really hard to let go and just be in that sort of piano roll and having a VST sort of running vibe. It's very different.
No, I agree with you. I think phase is incredibly important. I think you can have the best of both worlds these days though with stuff like oscilloscope or whatever it's called, and if you use synths that have solid retriggering and stuff like that with all of for instance Serum's oscillators are able to retrigger pretty solidly at this point, and if you put oscilloscope on every channel, then you're able to sort of view all the oscilloscopes in one plugin window, and then you're able to see all the phases and then that way you can keep it all in MIDI. And yeah, for instance,
people keep saying Serum to me. I've never used it or looked at it.
It's fucking insane. Same with Phase Plant. If you've never used Phase Plant, it's essentially if you can imagine any VST synthesizer that you've ever used before, but it just has no limits at all. You can add as many oscillators as you want, as many modulators as you want, as many effects as you want. And it has pretty much every effect available that you could think of. You can stack them as many times as you want. Literally, your only limitation is your computer, your processing power.
See, to me, I don't know if that's terrifying or amazing because,
it's both. I mean, you can get option paralysis. Would you spend
your whole life making sounds? I don't know.
It's possible, yeah. I mean, you can get sucked into that world for sure. at that point, I think, you have to like use some sort of like self-discipline or like whatever to be like, all right, this is a sound design session, this is a writing session. Like, don't confuse the two.
Do you do that when you write your music? Because I've noticed you've got a lot of intricate sounds in your sets where you drop into some incredible, like, and I can feel some of those sounds have been, tweaked and twiddled with, and they're sort of like, and that's got to be done in a single note thing. Like, how do you break that process up?
So sometimes it's accidental. Like, every now and then I'll be like, what the fuck, just render that. Like, and then other times it's like I'll sit there for hours and hours just making patches, and I'll just make like tons and tons of iterations of a single patch. And then I'll go back to the first one and it's like a completely different thing. So, I'll like I just have loads and loads of patches and loads of racks, because in Ableton you can like make audio effect racks or instrument racks or whatever. So I'll make an instrument rack, make audio effect racks, like all sorts of shit, and then I'll like macro tons of shit to like a rack and then make a bunch of iterations of the rack and stuff like that. And
so that's your adventure and your exploration sort of stage, I guess, of sound, would you say?
Yeah, kind of. And then when I'm writing, I do a little bit of sound design, but not as much as I would like in a specific sound design session. And then, when I'm, I guess, writing, I try to just like put it all together as a beat and just like move forward with the composing / beat writing process as much as possible without getting too caught up in the sound design stuff, because I feel like, it can very easily turn into a like, I'm vibing with this shit to fuck, there's too much 200 hertz in it. So, it's a balance for sure.
Yeah, that thing of breaking up your instrument design and the actual composing, it's and sometimes you fluidly switch between those two, I find, and other times like you've almost just got to keep it to a sound design sesh. It's a very interesting, like, when you try to go back to the sound design stuff, sometimes when you're midway through composing, and you can still tweak things and twiddle with them a little bit. Depending if you've rendered them, it's a little bit weird to then go back and like go back into the sampling sort of style thing and the design and just tweak something. It's sort of like, whoa, like where is everything? I don't know if you find that a little bit like it's two kind of different brains.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I think these days, back in the day when you were like in a band or whatever, it's like you in the band would be the drummer or whatever, and then you would go into the studio, you would do your drum thing, the guitarist would do their guitar thing, the bassist would do their bass thing. Then you would have an engineer who's like just there to record everything, and then you would have another engineer who's just there to like mix everything, and another engineer that you would send it to master everything. It's like at this point it's like you're the drummer, you're the person who's crafting the drum out of the wood yourself, you're the guitarist, you're the luthier, you're the mix engineer, you're everything. And at this point, like if you're even like building your own max patches or software and whatnot to do the thing as well, it's like you literally are the luthier and shit at the same time. It's like definitely it's going to be the equivalent would be like, maybe going into a studio to record a metal album and then be like, hold on 1 second, I'm just going to like go out to the woodworking shop here and like build my guitar, I think it's important to kind of like break those processes up so you're not jumping into like, two completely different mindsets or whatever and just like stunting your writing process.
And sometimes you got to have like, I even find this with modern stuff and sound engineering, you got to have like a day or a half day where you say, right, I'm just going to explore some completely new things I've never looked at before, just in case I like something comes across, which is like, and it's really hard. Sometimes you get stuck in your ways to actually stop yourself. I don't know if you find this as well, but just to stop and then have a look at something new and just have a twiddle with it and just like see what comes of it. Because in the back of your mind, you're like, I don't think I'd ever use that, or like, I'm not sure if I want to use that. For me, spectrosonic stuff comes to mind. Like, I was like, Omnisphere is just this big library thing. But then, that's probably my main go-to. I think I'm down to like, I've only got 4 VSTs on the whole computer, and like Omnisphere is one of them. It's like, it's like, apart from VSTFX, of course, they're full of those. But instrument generator-wise, like sometimes you'll just find something and be like, I have just been not looking at this whole time. Do you find that occasionally you come across a new one, or do you find that you prefer to just master the ones that like Serum? It sounds like that you're like a bit of a like massive rabbit hole god at Serum. Like, do you find that you get more satisfaction and like, out of that attacking that one and being this person who really gets into that rather than also taking the time to sort of explore, other things?
Yeah, I mean, I try to do both, right? Like I try to be extremely good at a few tools for sure, because sometimes you just want to be like, I need to do exactly this thing right now and I don't want to fuck around. But then obviously you want to make sure that you're not like missing out on any crazy shit too. So every now and then I'll buy some like, weird obscure plugin like for $14 off Plugin Boutique that's on sale, like Loom 2 or some shit that like nobody's using, and mess around with it. And like Loom 2 is a great example. It's like I bought it for about $15 on sale one day, and I was like, holy shit, this is like a better version of Razor. This is incredible. And like so definitely I think that's worth doing, because if you stop that exploratory process, not only does, like, you hear people all the time, or at least I hear people all the time saying shit like, man, like producing music, it used to be so fun. Back in the day I used to just get lost in the source for like hours and just like making crazy shit. And now these days it just feels like such a slog, and like I can't even like sit down to write music anymore. It's like such a pain in the ass. I'm like so uninspired, all this kind of shit. And I feel like part of that is for that reason, because they just like forget to explore, and I feel like that exploratory sort of childlike discovery process is most of the fun.
Absolutely. That's exactly why, I do the chip music thing as my limitation, creative limitation. And it's an interesting thing, that limitation as an artist, to bring out. But even when you're like taking a show on tour or something like that, and you've got to decide, well, how am I going to break this into a live show and turn it into something that's going to go on the road and that is playable also under stress? Because, sometimes there's a bit of stress, right, set up before a show. It's not the same as being zen in a studio. You need to be able to do things under pressure, especially if your fallback's got issues, or you've got all the stage is just like echoey, and especially those big festival stages are pretty weird when you first get on them, which I've only done a few, but it's like, whoa, where's the sound gone? It's like there's this empty void of like weird reflection-y stuff in front of you, and this body of like kind of real muffly sound, and then you can hear the audience really in your face, and then you've got these sort of stage monitors that are there, but it's kind of like bouncing into sort of nothing behind you, and then maybe off an LED screen behind you, bouncing straight back at your head, which is 10 meters behind you, and it's like 50 milliseconds of bounce. You're like, whoa, it's like,
totally,
so you got to sort of have something that I guess like where you could, you can still do things like under that pressure and that weirdness and have time to adapt without putting the pressure of a whole performance on yourself. So that, I don't know, how do you approach that? Like, I'm curious.
Either turn
do you bust out the synths and things live as well?
No, I'm a DJ. Oh, I used to. I mean, I had a full live show where I would like send MIDI. I had like a guy who was doing like fully synced visuals with me. So he'd have like a really powerful computer at the front of house. I'd have a really powerful computer on stage with me. And then I had a drummer who also had a really powerful computer. And we were sending Cat6 cables to each other. And like we were all fully synced on like a local network. And I would send MIDI to the drummer. He would send MIDI to me from his drums, and some of the MIDI stuff that he'd be doing would be triggering program changes in my session, and then stuff that I would be changing in my session would be changing some of the trigger sounds on his kit, and then both of our MIDIs were being sent to the front of house guy who was like inputting it into like either like Touch Designer or Notch or something like that, and would be triggering like synced visuals on the screen from the drummer and my controllers, and like we went to town on this live show. It was crazy. And no one gave a shit. But and then after that, man, I was like, dude, this is so much work. I spent like a year producing this fucking show, and I came out like massively in the red from it. And I was like, I just took it like I was just burnt out. I was like, I never want to fucking do a show again. And then I just like took a long sort of look at my career and was like, what do I even want, out of life and music, and like why I don't ever want to feel like this again, basically. And I was like, you know what, really what I like doing is being in the studio making beats. Like that's the fun part. So I was like, how can I do that and make a living out of it? So I was like, you know what, no one gives a fucking shit like what's going on. Like the whole show thing, that was for me, right? Like it's like people in the audience, maybe a few people cared, but like for the most part, people just want to go to a show and have a good time, right? They don't care.
Party,
they don't care how the sound's getting out of the speakers. So I was like, you know what? I just care about making beats, people just care about having a good time. I'm just going to make beats and play them off CDJs and just learn how to be a decent DJ. So I bought some CDJs, learned how to do like some pretty active mixing stuff, you know, where I'm just like constantly doing stuff on the CDJs so I don't feel like I'm doing nothing.
Yeah, it's funny that producer is a DJ.
Yeah,
it changes
exactly.
your mindset.
It does, yeah. And I mean, like, you know, there was two ways to go about it. I could either just convince myself that being a good DJ is about being a good librarian, basically, and two, being very patient and waiting. Or I could, like, you know, develop like routines, so to speak, where I'm like, you know, kind of doing a lot of stuff up there. So I went with the latter approach, and that's what I do now. So for the most part, it's like my set preparation has gone from a year down to like a week, if that, and my amount of time spent in the studio just making beats has gone from, you know, 6 weeks a year to almost every day, which is exactly what I want to do in life. So.
And you can be a lot more spontaneous because when you've got a show and you're touring a show, I guess you're locked down to it's a little bit like having a set list, and the way if you've got program changes and things and graphics, you can mix it up a bit, but there is still that sequencing of the show where I guess being spontaneous and bringing stuff the day before and the night before and things like that, you sort of can a little bit, but if there's multiple of you as well on stage, it makes it a little harder because you've got to have it all planned out and in your set and tested and run, and then it's that sort of nervousness. Whether if you can smash out the waveform and you've just got it ready to play off live, that means you can be more spontaneous and bring that energy and just really enjoy the moment of like you've put all those hard yards into the production and then just take it out for the people and celebrate that. Yeah,
exactly. And the thing is like if I, you know, I'm super stoked about this new thing that I'm playing versus, you know, in this live show, I was like kind of sick of it by the end. I was like, fuck, I would just like bang out this fucking 1 hour thing again. Like after 50 shows, I'm like just literally doing the same thing over and over again. So instead it's like, you know, doing this thing where I'm like, this is the first time I've ever played this. I literally just like rendered it out in the hotel and threw it on my USB stick like 20 minutes ago. Like that is way more exciting to me. And I feel like if I'm really excited about the thing that I'm doing, then everybody else all of a sudden becomes like way more excited because they're like, whoa, this guy's excited? Well, then fuck it. Like I must be sick, right? Like...
And you can tell when an artist is truly excited and playing something for the first time, especially when they get on the mic and they announce it and you're like, oh, cool, we're supposed to be able to hear this. You know? Yeah,
and you can likewise, you can tell if like they're kind of just bored as well. And I think like that rubs off on people a lot too.
Yeah. There's a famous story of there's a band from the 70s called Yes, or late 60s, and they did a lot of synth stuff sort of integrated with like, you know, live playing music as well. That very sort of progressive rock sort of vibe and melodic. But they did some really cool stuff. But they got to the point where the keyboard player was fairly famously renowned for once ordered like a full like meal on stage or had like takeaway and was just like eating at the same time as like playing the show. and
like, 'cause he was just bored. He just like played the set that many times.
Yeah, and I think he'd forgotten to eat, and so he'd like got one of the stage people to go off and do a takeaway for him, and got back and like unpacked it and sort of ate it as they played the show.
Jeez.
Like it's pretty legendary. It's kind of like you just think, wow.
Wait, Yes, the band that sings Lonely Heart is something of a Lonely Heart.
Lonely Heart, yeah.
Dude, they
did a lot of early Fairlight stuff.
Yeah,
in fact, the people, Trevor Horn and co, went on to be some of the most legendary like producers of the 1980s and 90s. You know.
Yeah, dude. That song is crazy. So actually, the only reason I've heard that song or know about it is I was hanging out with Patrick Leonard, who's the guy who wrote "Like a Prayer" by Madonna. And
amazing!
He wrote like a bunch of shit. Yeah, he invited me to his house in LA to like do some work. And I was hanging out with him there. He's like super into modular stuff as well. And he showed it to me in his studio, and I was like, what the hell? This is crazy. I like never heard of this.
Yeah, they've some of those 70s prog people, I get a lot of inspiration from those early sounds. They do some really wild, crazy stuff, especially with the synth sounds. And some of the acid jazz, like Chick Corea and co, they were there on those early synths, making these giant, swelling, incredible sounds, but using them very, very, very musically. But every now and again, you can just hear they went down a rabbit hole and did a sound design little sesh on them, like on the setup, the Moog big system thing, and you're like, "Whoa, that's heavy!" Like, and they did it live. They recorded it to tape, and then it was like that was it.
It's gone.
It was on the record.
Yep.
Some of those old sounds are incredible, and there's some really amazing stuff like from that era that you occasionally find where people noodled around with this electronic music before. You get these really weird records like Everything You Wanted to Hear on the Moog synthesizer but were too scared to ask for is one of the ridiculous albums I've got. And it's got this, and it was almost cartoony and these new synthesizer, sounds. And I don't know. I find it fascinating that exploration of synthesis, like how people over the years, now of course we hear it all the time. We're used to hearing electronic oscillators, but there was a time where, and I don't know how we got onto this, but there was a time where that was really, something that was people got a bit confused about. And I don't know if that's why, there's still this thing in us. I think it's back to that live performance thing of wanting to, sometimes as a musician, you're like, especially if you're a guitarist or something and you've got into that growing up, you're like, oh, I've got to put on a show and play the music, and you're so deep about that, like bringing the performance that you forget, especially with electronic music, that a lot of it is about just a good system in a room and a really good vibe, and that's where does it all cross over?
Yeah, and I think that line is just different for everybody, and I think for the most part, that line is defined by the artist themselves and how comfortable they are with doing essentially pressing a button between 1 and 20,000 times in a set or something, right? And it's like whether that button be a fret on a guitar board or a key on a keyboard or a play button on a CDJ. It's like, do you want to press the button in time 1 time or a billion times in the set? And how in time does it have to be, and how synced can it be, and all that shit? And like, at what point do you feel like you're legit doing so, like all that kind of stuff? And at what point does you pressing the button less times take away from the performance, and at what point does pressing the button more times take away from the music? And there's so many questions to answer for yourself. And yeah, I think for me personally, I just found that I skewed way more heavily on the I don't give a shit about a lot of the live quote unquote aspect of electronic music, just because like you put in all of this time editing shit and making it sound all crazy and crisp and clean and perfect, and then it's anything you do to it as a human being after that is going to be less good than what a computer can do, right?
That's right. And you've got a mastered finished track that you're really happy with and you've refined, right. And then it's oh shit, I've got to deal with having all of that. Right? And sometimes your mastering plugs and things, if you've got to redo that whole stage at the end of your thing, you get latency issues and things, so you might take it off or leave it to an engineer, and it's almost are we decreasing the quality of what we made at this point? I don't know.
Well, you yourself said you like to render everything down into audio to the point where you can see the phases of everything, right? And putting all of those phases in time, it's there's no way you can do that live.
No.
It's what's the point in doing all of that shit and then taking it live and then just destroying all those phases, So that's kind of where I got to with that mindset, I guess. Though when I do see people doing live electronic music stuff like Yodo or it's another good example Beardy Man or something like that, I'm it makes me laugh, it's when you see music that's that sick, it makes you laugh.
Yeah.
That's the response I have to it usually. I'm just what? So I'm envious of it a little bit, but at the same time I think it's not for me.
What do you think of the whole concept of the loop style stuff where you go on stage kind of or even with the whole live acid thing where it's you go on stage with nothing, a blank canvas, and then you just perform a set. That thought for me, I don't know if it's a bit terrifying. What happens if you don't get inspiration or have you ever seen sort of many of those sets where you just you watch something form and you're just whoa.
Yeah, I assume that probably they just do it enough and the energy from the crowd and whatnot is enough to carry them, and maybe if they aren't getting inspiration at the time, they probably have redundancy plans or contingency plans, where they're just drop into this thing and then I can sort of go through the motions of an old set or something. I'm sure there's once you get up to that level of professionalism, like Dub Effects or Beardy Man or Jacob Collier or something like that, I'm sure like there's no possibility of the set not happening if inspiration doesn't strike.
Yeah, totally. Yeah, I just find it fascinating watching some of those things unfold, and you're just like, wow, like how's this noodling all together? Especially something like have you seen Jacob Collier play live?
Yeah, I have. Yeah, he's insane. He like plays the whole crowd like an NPC. Basically, it's insane. He's like, all right, you guys do the kicks, you guys do the snares, you're a choir, and he's like, boom, ka, boom, bam, cue, ka. Like, yeah, it's crazy.
Yeah, and it's funny because, like, sometimes you just got to have someone who's got the guts and the like, intuition and just the true trust in the audience that they can do that and get away with it. I guess he's quite lucky because a lot of the audience members will be musicians, but yeah, I've found that fascinating, like that whole just making something from the crowd and then like then integrating it into a tune that you're playing, and then like at the same time as conducting a crowd and bringing them into it. I mean that's some pretty serious crowd interaction, like level wise.
Yeah, he's on another fucking level, dude. Like there's not many, if any, musicians I think out there that are quite at his level. I think he's managed by Quincy Jones, which is like the same guy who managed like Michael Jackson and stuff.
Yeah, like co-managed, I think, or it's definitely like draws a lot of like inspiration, and I think it sends all his demos to and things like that. Did you ever see the Harm With You or the Harm For You series, where people for a fundraiser on Patreon, he got people to send a 15-second like clip of them singing or playing an instrument or doing something, and then he would take that and then add like 100 other parts, or like, or do a harmonies over the top, or like do a full band. Someone would just be singing some like little thing they made up, and he'd chuck a whole disco track on top of it.
Wow.
And turn it into a track. It was incredible, but he would do each one within 3 hours, and he would live stream it and say, right, okay, I've got 3 hours. I'm going to take this a cappella someone's just sung in their bathroom on their phone to me, and I'm going to turn it into a whatever it turns into. And we'd just get it, lay it out, and we'd just start playing over the top, turn all snapping off, like whatever timing it was, we'd just play to it, and just have the waveform at all times on the screen so that he could see, where the cues were, and then just write to it, including like if it was microtonally out of tune, we'd actually like detune notes and things as he went and detune the instruments to sort of match. It's like, insane, wow, you're taking something and completely like you have like that. They have set the whole tone for what you're about to create based on, and some of them were kids. Like it was like, oh, my kid is a big fan of yours. Like they're going to sing a song now for you. And there'd be people like singing random, like, traditional European songs in the hills of somewhere. It's fascinating. It's called the I Harm You, it is actually. Yeah, I Harm and then the letter U. It's for any musician, I'd recommend checking those out.
I Harm You.
Because it's absolutely mind-boggling.
Wow.
Like, and that thing of that is your creative inspiration.
Holy shit. Okay, I see. Yeah, wow, okay. Yeah, I'll check this out. That's crazy. Hectic. Yeah, so you went pretty deep down that YouTube rabbit hole thing. Was it just during the pandemic that you started doing that, or were you doing that for a long time before?
I've been doing it for a fair while. I guess the main YouTube thing for me sort of kicked off about 2012. I had the Atari, which was an Atari 2600, which is kind of the most atonal computer from like 1976. Specifically says in the manual the oscillators are not for writing music, they're just for sound effects and they're not musical. So that was a good reason for me to try to get music out of it. So it's got two tone generators that generate, I don't know if you can hear this, but sort of this sort of engine noise.
Can't hear that.
Okay, right. So it's filtering it out. I can definitely hear it. You'll get it on the recording. But there's basically all of these like sound effects and noises that you get out of it, and square waves that are all at weird intervals. And so I decided to like try to make some music on the Atari 2600. But I found the output on it was really hot because I had to sort of like take an output and off the chip, and because these old machines only had like an aerial to plug into your old aerial TV, so if you want to plug it in a PA system or something, like you can't because there's no audio output. So you had to sort of solder your own audio output. But my particular one just had a really high output. So I ended up like using a guitar like bass EQ pedal to pull the like line level down, because it was the only thing I had that could take such a high signal, from a like slap bass and stuff. You get these really high voltages. So it could also take the input from the Atari. And then I decided, it sounds pretty good with a delay pedal as well, and I can use that to sort of squeeze stuff around and do. So I eventually made this thing called the Atari, which was it was the Atari, but with these guitar pedals and the joystick I needed all mounted on a board together. And we decided it'd be really funny after a few beers to turn it into a guitar. So you actually just wore it on stage.
Right.
And it was really because I needed to keep all of the bits together. And there was like pedals and there's things. And when you're getting on stage, you just need to plonk down a board with all your gear on it. So it was a real easy way of having a board with all the equipment on it. But we chucked this sort of stupid fake headstock, with my name on it, my artist name and stuff, and just turned it into the Atari. I chucked a video clip of explaining sort of what I'd done on YouTube, and then it just kind of took off and went a bit viral. So I guess that's where my first introduction, and people sort of knew me then as, that's that crazy guy that takes the chip music stuff and does stuff. So from there, and I went down a rabbit hole of, I haven't done a ton of stuff. Like I really want to do a bunch more YouTube vids. I've got like heaps of ideas, but just, I guess, documenting stuff that people are like often curious about, but there's no sort of stories like the story of, for instance, sampling using like the Commodore Amiga when you're a kid and you had no budget kind of story. Because a lot of people, in the especially late 80s, early 90s, in the studios, that was the documents of how people made music. They had an S950 and then they like brought that into the studio, and then they'd break it out onto maybe different samplers, and then they had a replayer and they had a desk and reel-to-reel machines and some effects. But like as a kid, you could never afford that as a 12-year-old. What did you have? You had like, a computer that could crunch out like 4 channels of 8-bit audio, and you had these like $20, $30 samplers that you could buy from the computer swap meet, or you could build your own circuit based on there'd be magazine articles right in the back of them with these like little things of, you're a musician, try to build this electronic circuit, and so you could, and they'd give you a parts order list. You'd go to Dick Smith, which is Australia's like Radio Shack,
right.
Be like, I need these bits. And then you'd like have to make a PCB. So you'd buy a little PCB making kit, and you'd like draw out the tracks, the traces, and then you'd put it in the sun and like make your own circuit board and use the chemicals to etch it. You could buy all this stuff, from the Radio Shack equivalent. I was lucky my dad was an engineer, so he was able to help me out with this stuff. And, you'd build a sound card, then you'd be able to like sample stuff into the computer and, and I guess nobody really documented that super ghetto homemade music sort of stuff. So I've been trying to do a little bit of that and actually exploring like some of the early music. Like this is a visual cue, but I've got one here that I'm going to look at pretty soon, which is like for the Commodore 64, there was this package that came out called, The Music Studio. And on the front, it has these mixing
DVD?
desks and all of this. No, this is a this is a cassette piece of software that you put in your Commodore 64.
Oh, wow.
And you load up. But it was pretty much one of the first VSTs, because if you look at the back of it, it's really hard to see, but there's these like screens. I'll make the video at some point. But these screens that had all of your oscillators and had all of the access to the chipset. So you had like, but choose between square wave and sine wave and triangle wave, and you could set filters and you could do things. But it was like really the very first software implementation of where you were doing it on a screen. And interestingly, it's almost impossible to use because you have to use a joystick instead of a mouse to get to everything. So, and it's like, it's a digital joystick. It doesn't have degrees of movement. So it's just like,
it doesn't like
you have to like left,
one
right,
point at a time. It's
That's right. And then you get to the thing you want to change on the screen, then you hold the button and then you move it left or right to change that thing. Could you imagine like programming an instrument?
Fuck that.
And it's got this really early half music staff, half piano roll, weird thing, like nothing else I've ever seen on it. And it's just really early, like, this is what you had back then. So I like to document those kind of systems and say, well, let's try to make a track in them and like use nothing but this gear but then use that to tell the story of, well, this was the stuff that was sold as the dream to the kids. You know, they couldn't afford something that was more than $50. And so there were things that were out there that were super cheap and super ghetto that people made tunes with, you know. This was the homebrew market. Now you get something like GarageBand or like, you know, even the stuff that comes with an iPad is hugely powerful, you know.
Yeah, totally. And people are
and it's always been
complaining
around. Yeah, it's just that it's been around in these really odd iterations and no one really bothered to keep the stuff or really document it. So that's my YouTube channel, is looking, I guess, at a bunch of that kind of stuff.
Yeah, I've watched a bunch of the videos on there, man. It's super interesting. I think the one I watched, you like had a record or something and you were like sampling just like hits off a record onto some sort of tracking software. And
yeah, it was the Amiga, Commodore Amiga,
Yeah. It's great. Yeah, it was a great video. I showed it to my manager and he was like, what the hell? He's like, what the fuck is this? But yeah, it's funny, yeah, because I mean, like most people, they have no idea that like that's even possible. Like, because a lot of the producers these days, even fucking some of the really, really incredible producers are like, 15 years old and they like have no idea what a Commodore 64 is. Like when they were born, they like had a Skype account when they were like 3 years old and shit, it's like.
Yeah, and that barrier to entry that used to be around, computer gear. Like you used to get the magazines and stuff from the stores and they had all of this gear and things in and you'd read about it and know about it, but you could never afford it. You're like 12, 13 years old and you'd be subscribed to like, your Audio Technology or your Future Music magazine and you'd be looking at this stuff like, wow, and learning all about it and reading about the Orbital and like all of these, groups and things that were out there, or like, there'd be a special on like the Prodigy and their studio and all the stuff that's in. But, you were on a paper round or not even doing that, you had $60 in your bank. The cheapest thing available was like, $2,000. Right. He's like now, like you just have a computer. And I guess that's the thing. Like, people have grown up and it's kind of exciting that from a kid, they talk about like the old versions of Ableton in Windows 7 and LOL, back in the day. Oh, do you remember Windows XP? It's like, holy shit, it's hardly changed at all since that. Right. Like, should have seen the 10 years before that, mate. It's like, it changed massively, Right.
Well, I'm pretty sure everyone listening to this is going to be like, listen to these fucking boomers. But like,
well, it is a bit like that. But at the same time, I feel a lot of excitement and I love it. Like the fact that people are so in touch with their software because they've always used it, It's like riding a bike or something. It's like, ever since a kid, they've been on that software and using it and so fluid and just into it. That's wild.
Totally.
That's cool.
Yeah, man. It's fucking awesome that you're like, you're there like preserving this information online in a sense where people can now access it on a platform like YouTube rather than having to go digging for it on, the Dogs on Acid forum or like, which I don't even know if that exists anymore. Surely you can find it on the Wayback Machine or something. But yeah, man, it's really awesome to see that someone like you or a bunch of people out there are like still heavily engaged in this scene. Because whenever I look at stuff like that, it's like I would never dive into it personally myself, probably, but just watching it, I'm like, man, this is crazy. It's like impressive to watch at least.
And it's just an interesting, I think people still have an interest in the history of stuff.
Totally. But
they don't necessarily they just want to see a 20-minute snapshot of how it worked, what it did, what it sounded like, roughly how it was used, and the pros, especially, the cons of it, like, right. Just like using it with a joystick. People are like, that's crazy,
Yeah. I mean, this might be, Serum and Ableton one day when we're all making music in VR headsets and we all have neural links in our brains and stuff like that. And we're just thinking out music and we're like, well, back in the day, you had to use these mouse and keyboards and like input MIDI notes into a piano roll. And there'll be people in these VR headsets going like, what the fuck?
Well, have you played around? You played around with the VR headset stuff, yeah? And the music composing software? Yeah. It's fascinating.
It's getting there, yeah. It's not quite there yet, but...
Yeah, and I always wonder, like, is there a better, like, are we going to progress beyond the mouse and the keyboard and a synthesizer?
100%, dude.
Like,
well, fucking, of course. I mean, like, at this point, you've got, like, these iPhones and iPads with, like, 10-point, like, finger gesticulation shit. And, like, there's apps on my phone now where I can make music. And, like, I'm not very good at these apps, but I'm like, I can tell, like, it's getting to go in the direction where this would be just 100 times faster than making music on a computer. And I could do it on my phone, on an airplane, in AirPods, just like super easily, like if I got good at it, you know?
So do you think that the whole, I mean, I love the concept of the big style tablets where you have like a big screen and you can really get your fingers into it and like, you know, as you say, the multi-touch thing, because with a mouse pointer, it's just like it's the little thing that you zig around the screen, you know?
Yeah.
And whether you can jump to things instantly and like, I know some of the, like there was some early implementations of the controllers and things that could do that too. Do you think that's really the future of where it's sort of going to go?
I mean, I think so. Like, I mean, how can I just don't see how a mouse and a keyboard is like more agile than being able to just like put 10 fingers on a screen at the same time and move shit around. Like, you know, with like, there's so much more gesticulation there and so much more like stuff that you can be doing, you know, like pinching and stuff like that and moving stuff around and like scrolling up and down with just your finger. And like that to me just seems way more fluid. We're just not used to it yet, right?
Yeah. Even as a controller and performing and using stuff live. I mean, imagine, you know, you see people do it, but, you know, with two controls and things and every single finger and how it's also pressure now because they have the whole pressure control.
Totally.
Which is a whole another dimension.
Yeah, totally.
It's just how do you build interfaces for that so that it works without the barrier to entry being too high, you know?
Right. Yeah, I think the next step beyond that would be like something like Neuralink, right, where you go and get a piece of your skull removed and they put a little disc in there with a bunch of these like probes. Like, did you see that Neuralink thing, the Elon Musk thing?
Oh, yeah, that goes in your, yeah.
Yeah, he's like, well, just remove a small piece of your skull, essentially put like a coin, looks like, you know, a 10-year sobriety coin or whatever, like, and then just like in your head, and then off this coin there's like a, you know, some I guess cables essentially that just like poke into your brain and they send electromagnetic signals or whatever into your brain, and the whole thing like Bluetooths to a thing, and it's like you can just whatever send information to and from your brain directly. You know, the bandwidth is just getting like, because right now we're almost cybernetic, right? As it is, it's like right now we're able to have our phone and do a bunch of shit. It's just the bandwidth between our thoughts and what we want to do and the phone and making it do what we want is limited,
by our
right?
hand.
Yeah, by our hand and how fast we can do the thing and how fast the phone is and all that kind of shit and how fast it connects to the internet and all that crap. Like there's a bunch of bottlenecks there. It's like once we just remove that bottleneck and that just goes in our head, then that bandwidth is just going to get like smaller and smaller, and to the point where it's just like we're just thinking shit and shit happens.
And then you got to start thinking. But for me, that I then go, well, like if it's thought control, what happens if you have like, you know, because your brain tends to wander and, you know, come in and out and your mood changes and stuff, you know, how would that affect? Is that going to deeply affect the performance, like in terms of, you know, if you're using neural, like how does it change your thoughts? And do you have to program yourself, like, or like force yourself to think in certain ways? And
right, probably
like, how would you battle being nervous?
Yeah, exactly. Hopefully there'd be a bunch of like smart filtering or something like that in the data that, you know, like takes whatever's coming in and goes like, all right, we know to ignore that data.
Yeah, maybe there's a nervous mode or something that you put on that sort of dampens out your thoughts and the way you're doing things.
Yeah, right. You just tell it like, oh, I'm feeling a little iffy today. Maybe just don't listen to me today or something.
Yeah, go on the other 5 performances I've done and like sort of pick up the cues and then run with that data. Like and maybe that's a thing. It's you end up with a refined performance or refined things whereby, you know, you're doing things and it's taking your previous thoughts and your previous ways of doing things and falling back on those and making partial decisions for you, like based on and preempting what you're going to do and preempting setting things up, you know, in advance, especially if you're true. I mean, that's back to that whole, if you're going true live, like performance and, or even composing, you know, where do you start making it where it helps you? And I guess that's where that whole AI thing is starting to do that. Where have you seen that image generation software where you can type in a specific series of Yeah. I'm a part of the Signal group. Oh wow, yeah.
You go in there and you just type in like /imagine and then whatever. So you can be like, imagine Elon Musk riding a rhinoceros or whatever, and then it goes like, you are number 2 in queue, and then it's like 2 minutes later, it just sends it back to the signal chat.
Yeah, it's like it's a dog. Imagine a dog riding a horse with a sword in Renaissance style, something, and you can get super specific. Go, and it generates this amazing thing. Now but you thought of that idea, and that's the thing. I mean, I'm wondering like where, like even like where your style and then the things that you pick based on what you like become you making something based on your preference. So that's your flavor and your signature,
Right.
And I wonder if music's going to do that like at some point as well, where you've got composing and you've got things where you can define parameters and get pre-generated slabs of music and sound, but your sound and you as an artist is sort of how you go about that, and maybe there is some neural connection to it as well.
So here, look, I just said, imagine, you can barely see that. Wait, can I... God damn it. I said, imagine cTrix, and it said, you were number 1 in line, started a new worker, probably take like 2 minutes or something. Wait, is it?
Yeah.
Oh man, it's not.
Although, is it going to change it to cTrix and not realize that, like...
Yeah, we'll see what it spits out.
But yeah, I don't know. There's some really crazy thoughts when it comes to like what is the future of interaction with like, generating music, and what are we going to use if we're using like trackers, then piano roll, and then like keyboards and things now? Like, what are we going to use in the future?
Well, it's just been whatever integrates more fluidly with the human body seems to be where it's going, right? It's like it used to be this thing where you used to have to punch a bunch of holes in a piece of paper and then feed a bit of paper into a thing, and then that would convert it into binary or whatever, and then it became keyboards, and then it became voice activation software, and now it's fucking watches. It's like the technology, if you just speed it up, it's basically a thing that like wasn't there, spawned, and now is like jumping onto our body and climbing onto our face. Like that's essentially what's happening. If you just speed up the progression of like how technology has started interacting with humans in the last like 100 years.
Yeah, and there's some things that, like, I always think that the whole piano roll thing was pretty clever. Even like the step sequencing, it's really now, well, it became, I guess, 2-dimensional. Like originally on a drum machine, you'd have one instrument at a time, and then you'd have to pick which one, and then you'd like program in. If you've used the 909, they're just selecting it. It's not hard to do, but now we've just got that as like an extra axis. We've got the vertical axis as well, and we can punch in vertical as well as horizontal for our timing to build our beats. So we've got that piano thing, the piano roll thing. And there's like, to me, it seems like that third dimension, like adding that so that you've got another dimension just makes sense somehow. So you've got a cube of composing rather than, but it's, and I guess that's your things like your parameters per note and your levels and stuff by changing colors and things like that. That's another thing. But it's like, how many more layers of things can we, and then can we make it so it's shapes or things in space, where especially if you're in VR and it's high res, where it's the even you're creating filters around the shapes of your your sounds and your individual notes. Maybe you're getting in there and changing a note like putty, and depending on the sort of beanie, sort of weird shape of the things that you're making in space as you go, that's changing filters and changing the way your notes sound. Or maybe it's not, is that, and is that a viable input? I really love that idea of 3D objects in space, like, just tweaking it like the same piano roll style, but you're shaping literally with your fingers or whatever each note. And maybe, if the sharper and rougher it is, the more it's got a big buzz, like maybe it's converting to some FM operator that's doing something compared to sort of like roughly flattening it and smoothing it off at one side. Maybe that's the way it's generating the sound.
Or you could just take any of those parameters and map them to whatever you want, right? You could be like...
exactly.
Because, maybe different people see sharp as sounding different to other people and smooth as sounding different to other people.
Yeah, I'm very curious, because like people do with MIDI controllers now, like, everybody sets up a MIDI controller differently.
Right, yeah, exactly. This thing finally spat out this image. It took like 2 minutes. I'll send it to you after. It's kind of hard to see, but like, it's... you can't really see it. I'll send it to you. But,
hilarious. So they're actually allowing people's specific tags in now, because didn't they dehuman it at some point? So you couldn't put people's names in? No.
Well, I mean,
so it just takes the internet.
It takes whatever, and it just like Googles shit and just figures it out. it's crazy. It's insane. I'll send you a link to the Signal group, and you can.
Yeah, amazing.
Well, hey man, thanks a ton for coming on here. I really appreciated your time, and this chat has been really interesting. And it was really cool. I just randomly got an email from someone, and they were just like, "Hey, you should get cTrix on." And I was like, "I know that guy. Maybe we should." Yeah. So I really appreciate you coming on.
Yeah, no worries. It's been an absolute joy. I mean, it is morning here, so I'm a little bit morning brain, but it's been a pleasure. And look, I got to say congrats on the podcast, because there's been some absolutely fantastic content, and certainly through lockdown. I mean, I caught the odd one, and it was just great that you tackled some of the the hard issues and taught. It was just some great content. So thanks for carrying the torch for electronic musicians.
Of course, man. Yeah, and I think having you on is just is another piece of great content for people, because I haven't had anyone on actually who does the things that you do. Really, I think the closest might be Richard Devine or something, but not even similar really.
Well, it's my promise. I'm going to get out there and record a bunch of this stuff at some point. I think I've got to drop that thing of getting too caught up on the mastering and mixing process and just dump a bunch of it out there. There's about 100 tracks, hopefully, coming in the next couple of years. So
yeah, I mean, I'm sure a bunch of people would appreciate it. In the meantime, where can people check you out? You have the Debug Live YouTube channel? Yeah,
the Debug Live YouTube channel's got a bunch of historical content. I haven't made anything for a while, but I've got plans to put new stuff up soon. So
yeah, and what about if people want to listen to your music? What's the best way?
The best way is actually, without digging through console-specific things, there's a little bit on SoundCloud. But I guess I'm trying to think where it is. There's a lot on compilations on Bandcamp. There's quite a few stuff that I've done. So if you
ctrix.bandcamp.com or something?
Yes, cTrix. I should go and actually make a link to all the comps and things that I've got tracks on, because that would make it a lot easier.
Dude.
But there is ctrix.net, so I might go up and chuck a list of stuff up there in the next few hours so people can link to it.
Perfect, man. All right. Well, thank you so much.
No worries. Anytime.
Yo, what's up? Thanks for listening to the Mr. Bill podcast. This show is produced and edited by Robert Fumo. You can get early access to the show by going to my website, MrBillsTunes.com, and paying me instead of Patreon. And remember to go rate and review on iTunes, or I'm going to come to your house and punch your dog in the throat, upper deck your toilet, and fuck your partner. Note, I may or may not do those last couple of things. You should probably just go rate it on iTunes or Spotify or whatever it is that you listen to the podcast on, because it really helps the podcast. But just know that it'll go a long fucking way to me not doing those things if you do go do that. So just putting that out there.